Welcome back. I'm Maciel, and I'm reading from my book, The Five Vows, Raising Your Spiritual Commitment to the Next Level. This is Chapter 7, The Vow of Obedience. It's no surprise that the vow of obedience is perhaps the most controversial of the five vows. After all, no one likes to be told what to do. Rules can be restrictive. They don't always apply to the situations in our lives. But most of all, we don't want to surrender our conscience to someone else. After all, we are the ones who will be held accountable for our actions, not them. There is, however, a deeper, more real aspect of this vow, one that is rarely talked about, because we don't like to admit it, not even to ourselves. Let me explain. The typical understanding of the vow of obedience is within the context of religious orders, which are hierarchical systems. Brothers and sisters, whether a novice or head of the order, are expected to obey the directives given to them by their superiors. Organizational integrity is necessary any time human beings engage in a common enterprise. The more enlightened understanding, however, is that one takes the vow of obedience to the God self within, which can manifest as intuition, conscience, or impressions from your higher self. The outer chain of command is, in any spiritual group, is supposed to be a means to get you there. Maybe this is why Jesus said that his kingdom is not of this world. But what happens when you do get there? Are you going to be any happier taking orders from God than you were taking orders from other people? I know this is a little bit like asking, if you win the lottery, are you going to spend the money? But most of us have never won the lottery, so any idea about what we would do is strictly a daydream. The same thing is true when it comes to inner guidance. If you believe that God loves you completely and unconditionally, taking orders might not be that big of a deal. In fact, being led in the paths of righteousness and made to lie down in green pastures actually sounds pretty good. One could do a lot worse. But the word obedience comes with baggage. It implies power over. And no one likes to have power lorded over them, not even, and perhaps especially, by God. As long as you see God as something external, perhaps the cosmos or the universe, or anything else that is intrinsically inescapable, you're not going to want to subject yourself to it. Why? Because subjecting yourself to anything is to go against the spirit. Whose spirit? Your spirit. If spiritual development leads to anything, it leads to freedom. If it did not, the term spiritual freedom would be an oxymoron. And no one likes to be a moron. No one seeks mastery just so they can be mastered. If you're a saint, this line of reasoning is going to really annoy and possibly offend you to no end. Saints will vehemently protest that their relationship to God is one of love, that their relationship to Christ is that of bride. But ask anyone, even a saint, what the role of women is in marriage, and no one, except maybe a diehard fundamentalist, is going to say that women should be subservient to their husbands. The great German mystic Meister Eckhart said, "God needs me." He had a deeper understanding of our relationship to God than the church. The inquisitors were going to burn him at the stake for it, but he beat them to it by dying of natural causes before they could bring him to trial. Smart, that. His was a bolder, more sophisticated understanding of our relationship to God. What most of us seek is empowerment, the power to live our lives more fully and authentically, knowing that such a life also empowers others. Those who have this kind of devotion to life itself see life as a dance, not a march. Their relationship with God is a holy marriage filled with mutual love and devotion, not as master and slave, not even as king and subject, and certainly not as man and subservient wife. We know that this arrangement doesn't work in a physical marriage. Why should it work in our relationship with God? If a principle is true anywhere, it is true everywhere. Motion and spirit. Following the Spirit is a positive affair because the Spirit is positive. It is always initiating action. But in order for the Spirit to move, there has to be a vacuum, a need. We create that need through the action of prayer. Far from begging, real prayer is setting a pattern, a living pattern, that the Spirit can fill. Action begets action. If we want a job, we knock on doors, we ask. If we want to be an author, we write. If we want to be loved, we find someone and love them. No intelligent person expects to move forward in life by sitting around doing nothing. Once our living prayer has been made, it is up to us to respond to the Spirit as it starts to move in and through the pattern we have set. Once we put our cause into motion, we then become the effect of it. The movement of the Spirit sweeps through us like the wind, guiding our next move, inspiring our every thought, speaking the words we need to say in a kind of divine possession of the tongue. The Spirit ignites us with its white-hot flame, and the world responds by surrendering to us everything we need. And we discover very quickly that once our life starts to heat up, any resistance on our part, especially the resistance of doing nothing, can be hell. Once you grab hold of the tiger's tail, you don't want to let it go. Our body is set up to respond to thought, and prayer is formulative thought. If we initiate one thought pattern and then contradict it with another, we add resistance to the circuit. The contradiction will outpicture in our life. The universe, which normally comes to our aid when we boldly commit to a course of action, will instead present us with unsolvable problems so long as the contradiction in our programming exists. Obedience is a form of non-resistance to the automatism of the unfolding of our plans. God demands but one thing from us, that we think and act from the deepest, most authentic part of ourselves. Because unless we can hear our own inner voice, how are we going to hear the voice of God? Unless we have stripped away the conditioning, the rules of others, the artificial conventions superimposed on the collective mentality of the society in which we live, how are we going to feel the wind of the Spirit, the one that Jesus said could not be managed? The wind blows wherever it pleases. You hear its sound, but you cannot tell where it comes from or where it is going. So it is with everyone born of the Spirit. John 3:8. Of course, all of this can only be a recipe for disaster if one is psychopathic. This book is not for psychopaths. They don't need my help to push them over the edge. They're already there. It's too easy to slip into megalomania, thinking that everything that comes from within oneself is true. No, this book is an update to the spiritual path, spirituality 2.0, if you will. It's a strategy for living spiritually in the 21st century, not the Middle Ages. Unfortunately, most of the literature in Western religion comes from that era, so we need to bring the program up to date. Through us, as us. If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. That's from the Gospel of Thomas. What is within us is not foreign to us. God works with what is already there. Our hopes and ideals are a living force within our heart, the inner plan we have cultivated throughout our existence. We ignore it at our peril. God's will for us is never a thing added from outside of us. The divine continually gives life to our own inner nature, the desire of our heart, the same way the sun gives life to a rose. God wants us to unfold into a fuller, more developed version of ourselves, to be creative and inventive, to explore the potential of our soul. What can arise will arise, but only if it is already there. Why then would we fear the demands of the Spirit? We must be true to that which we love. Our heart's desire is the signature of our calling. It is wedded to our ideals and brought to life by our actions. When it speaks, we must listen and then act upon what we hear. Our very life depends upon it. It depends upon it because our heart's desire is our life. It is that for which we live. Obedience to the God self within requires a stepping out on our part. We must first be in motion before we can receive guidance. And when guidance comes, it will be creative and full of surprises, and it will sometimes demand of us the seemingly impossible. But no one is asked to exceed their capacity, so our yes leads us in a journey of self-discovery. Obedience to God, obedience to self, inviting and then allowing God to express through us as us. This is the essence of the vow of obedience. Anything else is power over. Obedience and apprenticeship. It should be obvious by now that taking vows raises a person to levels of commitment significantly higher than reading books, going to church, or talking about spirituality. When you take vows in a church, it usually means that you are signing up as a deacon or some other official position. You assume some of the ministerial duties to the congregation, and you are under the direct supervision of your pastor or priest. But the point of this book is to explore the role of vows in one's everyday life, in ways that go beyond a religious setting. After all, vows are deeply personal. They are a commitment to God, not to an organization. First of all, let's look at the word apprenticeship in the context in which it lives. Apprenticeship implies learning, of course, but more significantly, it implies that there is a body of knowledge that already exists, and the point of apprenticeship is to learn it. Apprenticeship also implies that there is someone qualified to teach that body of knowledge, someone who has not only learned the knowledge itself, but who has practiced it to the extent that he or she has mastered its application. These then are the key words when it comes to apprenticeship: mastery and application. Mastery of the ideas alone is insufficient. You can't attain spirituality by only reading books and attending lectures. In fact, too much book learning can actually prevent one from being a good apprentice, because you find yourself constantly questioning what the teacher is trying to show you. Nor can you learn from someone who hasn't lived what he or she is professing to teach, and not only lived it, but lived it with some degree of success. Let's take the example of rock climbing. Your friend comes to you and says, "Hey, let's take up rock climbing. I know this great face we can climb. It's about 100 feet high. We'll get some equipment and climb that thing." There are two, at least, potentially fatal flaws in this line of thinking. One is that anyone can do it. Anyone can climb a cliff as long as they have some equipment and the will to climb it. Secondly, there is the assumption that there is something external to be conquered, in this case, the rock. In reality, what needs to be conquered is oneself. This will become immediately obvious once you get more than 10 feet off the ground. There is a lot to know before one actually attempts to climb a rock, regardless of its size. There are ropes to learn. There is also another assumption that can lead to disaster: the notion that there is nothing really dangerous here. It just looks like a lot of fun, and it's a cool thing to do, something that you can tell your friends about. "Hey, I'm a rock climber." You scatter equipment all over your apartment, and you keep some of it in the backseat of your car so that your friends can see it, and you wear your climbing shoes to the mountaineering store. Part of this is the getting into it phase. But if we're honest with ourselves, we know that we're more interested in the idea of being a rock climber than we are in the work to actually be one. But we're not talking about rock climbing, are we? We're talking about making a serious commitment to the spiritual path, which, by the way, also has a cool factor. Hey, I'm a meditator. I know all this neat stuff about yoga and the Kundalini, about the chakras and the Pleiades, about the Egyptian Book of the Dead and Deepak Chopra. Just check out my bookshelf. It would be far more productive in terms of spiritual development to spend a couple of hours a week helping out at a homeless shelter than it would be to study yet another book or spend one more minute arguing about spirituality on Facebook. These are the hard facts. The Yogi Ramakrishna said, "Do not seek illumination unless you seek it as a man whose hair is on fire seeks a pond." And Jesus said, "For which of you, wanting to build a tower, doesn't sit down first and compute the cost to see if he has enough money to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish the tower, all who see it will begin to make fun of him." Apprenticeship has a price. Make sure you are willing to pay it before you commit yourself seriously to the spiritual path. Excuse me. You've probably noticed by now that I have gone out of my way to avoid the word disciple. This is completely intentional. Why? There are two reasons. One is that the word disciple has too much religious baggage, most of it negative. And two, it's all too easy to equate discipleship with following a philosophy. No one would say, for instance, in today's world, that they were a disciple of Ouspensky. Ouspensky is dead. Therefore, one can only be a reader of Ouspensky, not a disciple. To be a disciple of someone, you must be in their presence. Being in the presence of someone who has mastered what you are seeking to learn has several distinct advantages. First, there are some things that cannot be put into words. They can only be transmitted. This is true regardless of what you are learning. Confidence, for instance, is not only something you develop over time as you learn a skill, it is also infectious. You can actually pick it up from your teacher. And oftentimes, catching it in this way gives you the necessary courage to try things you wouldn't ordinarily try on your own. There is a kind of magnetic induction that occurs between teacher and student, a connection that allows a transmission of real knowledge, a vibratory quality that you can take with you. This vibration disrupts the filter you already see and think through. It will poke holes in it and show you new things, new ways of perceiving the world, allowing you to respond to situations differently than you would otherwise. It does this through your intuitive and imaginative faculties, revealing itself in ways that make you think that they came from your own mind. It is to these higher promptings that we vow our obedience, not to the demands of the teacher. Any teacher who tries to force you to obey what he says is like a gardener who tries to force his plants to grow by pulling on them. Spiritual growth can only happen from the inside out. The best teachers teach by suggestion and with a lot of patience, not by intimidation or threats of expulsion from the group. If you encounter such a teacher, run away fast. We grow spiritually as a result of suggestion over a period of time. Of course, this is also how we function in the world, but usually we are unconscious of the source of our thoughts and preferences, which is the mass mind and its cultural conditioning. Usually this kind of conditioning is for the benefit of the larger group, not necessarily for us as an individual. Our needs are subjugated to the needs of society. But the spiritual path always demands that we leave the path of others to seek and discover our own unique relationship to the divine. This always makes us feel like a stranger in a strange land. A legitimate teacher recognizes this and will never try to force you to do anything that violates your conscience. Through the vibration of a good teacher, we get a higher perspective, a more universal view of the world and our place in it. We can easily identify this new vibration because it usually wants us to step outside of our comfort zone. Life seems to get harder, more challenging. This will also change the way other people see us. We will appear out of step with the norm, and they will start to treat us as the other, no longer a member of the tribe. This is what Jesus meant when he said, "Blessed are they who are persecuted for my name's sake." If you're newly on the spiritual path and everyone loves you, be concerned. Unless they too are on the spiritual path, no one is going to celebrate the changes you go through. It's this potential ostracization that makes us prone to obey the impulses of the world, no matter how strong the vibration of the teacher may be. That's the nature of being human. But as we become more conscious and make the extra effort to reach as high as we can into our intuition, it becomes easier to act on what we are hearing. And as we act upon these higher promptings, we amalgamate them, and we become transformed into a new being. The law is written in our hearts, and we no longer need to be told right from wrong. We realize Jesus' statement, "I am in the world, but not of it." The vow of obedience versus following the rules. I live in California, possibly one of the most litigious states in the country. There is an inordinate fixation on rules out here, especially in the area of regulatory law. So much so that when it comes to environmental legislation, the rest of the states know that as California goes, so goes the nation. Whatever is mandated here will be mandated in Peoria 10 years from now. This has its upside in that one of the first things Californians notice when they travel to other states is the smell of automobile exhaust. The air quality restrictions here are so fierce that smog is almost non-existent, even on a hot summer day. There are stark differences between the East Coast and California in the way people follow rules. Blue blood versus Hollywood. Pinstripe suits and wingtips versus blue jeans and Nike running shoes. If ever there was a case where spiritual polarity mirrors geographical polarity, this is it. The East Coast has deep undercurrents of tradition, whereas in California, innovation is the norm. This may have something to do with the East Coast's colonial beginnings, the New England, and California's golden aura as the land of opportunity, the new frontier. But both reflect our own inner polarities, our Saturn and our Jupiter, our desire to be safe and our need to explore. So it is with the vow of obedience. There are rules we must follow and there are rules we must break. There is a natural rhythm that rules provide, a safety zone wherein we can know ourselves. But there is the unknown part that beckons. When we are ready, there is the unknown part of us that beckons. When we are ready, a calling. And it is to that calling that we owe a higher allegiance. This makes us despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrows, as it says in Isaiah. But to our calling we must be true, even if it means that we will be alone. There is no such thing as the sound of a different drummer to those who are rule-bound. That's the end of chapter 7. And next we'll read chapter 8, Putting It All Together. See you in the next video.